welcome to the Agile Podcast. Today we have Brian Fidalgo as our guest. Yay! Welcome, Brian.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So today our topic is going to be the role of a service manager, which Brian plays not just on TV, but in real life also.
What is a service manager?
Great question.
I think I'd start with this since
That's a good one. What is a service manager? So service manager, I would say, is the person who fits in every role that is not defined.
Oh.
Right? So we get to do and we get the ability to help and provide management of every service available, right? Whether that be the services provided by other people, the services the teams you support provide to the business, the services the corporation as a whole provides to the teams that are servicing the application. I often like to say we're the gray space in the areas that are defined, right? We help everybody do the jobs that they're hired to do. We provide clarification of the processes that they should be following. Very similar to the Scrum managers. And similar, just like that idea of, I don't think we have any one place that we are nailed down to other than making sure that we communicate from all sides, both sides, right? Like from the development side to the application support, from application support to development, and then to the business. So we communicate to the trifecta.
Are you involved in new initiatives at launch, or is this more like a maintenance of software that's out there in the field, or
both?
Both,
absolutely. Like right now, I've got 2 projects, or even 3, right? So one that I'm personally developing to a new solution for a business team that I support, and then on both the development and the support of like BAU, if you will, the application support. I manage and support both teams, right?
What is BAU?
So like business as usual, right? So so anything that has made it across the table, as you will, from the applications, from the development side to the application support, like where we've defined, like, here, it's now yours to run, right? And the processes that circle around that, incident management, change management, those kind of processes and improvements thereby.
I guess now would be a good time to say that Brian works in a very large corporation, a very large ecosystem that contains much like the sky contains a potential infinite amount of stars in it.
Sure.
That's a good point. So I was going to ask about this role of service manager. Do you encounter that in such large corporations, or is it also present in the smaller organizations? When I say small, I mean 100-person organization or less, right?
Sure. So it's interesting you ask that, because I come from a family-owned business. Right, so my family, we opened the first auto parts store in Tampa. We opened General Auto Supply in 1916. It was on Cass Street, and it closed in 1998. But I've been part of a family business my whole life, right? Pretty much till like 2015, till I sold my family business to a corporate entity and went to work for them. But so I would say, amazingly enough, a product manager is very much like a business owner, right? You see where there's gaps, you see where there is process that needs to be clarified or cleaned, and you do it, right? Because without it, all the different pieces of the puzzle that are doing the best that they can to fulfill the roles that they're assigned may not have all of the tools they need to fulfill those things. And that's where you come in to either bolster their knowledge or give them some opportunity to provide the services they're really hired to do those things.
That's like the vision. That's why I'm in product now, because when people tell me stories, I build a vision in my head, and that's like just naturally what I do now. That's the vision that's building in my head when you're talking about service management. I'm thinking of it directly relates in my head to product management, but product management at scale, where you have a whole bunch of different programs. Same thing.
Same thing, right?
Yeah, you have a
Yeah.
whole bunch of different
Yeah.
products under the banner of services that the one or more, because I would assume there are several service managers in the organization.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You have many products that those service managers are contained within their, I guess, sphere, area of responsibility.
Sure.
AOR. Ooh, use a military term. That's immediately what I thought of. I was like, this sounds a lot like some kind of scaled product management.
Sure.
You know, where you're trying to make sure that the product served by your organization is some sort of level is maintained, some sort of service
Sure.
level or quality or whatever
Sure.
is being maintained.
Sure, absolutely. Meets the needs that's expected of that product or service.
Internal and external, because the organization itself probably has some standards or needs or qualifications.
Right.
You know?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
right.
internal stakeholders that are
what
using
I
or
mean,
consuming those services too, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
And then external, to your point, the people that maybe actually pay for it, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, and a lot also too revolves around communication, right? So just in that, because of, like you said, the multitude of stars, right? It is only human nature to not be able. We don't know what we don't know, right? So as a service manager, we're often there to also call the audibles, be like, hey, there's some things that we're already doing in this space, right? And this is how we do this. This is a good idea. This is a bright spot of how we work this. Here's an opportunity for you to jump on board with this process that's already been codified and clarified in this regard. So jump on board as opposed to reinventing the wheel every single time, right? Like reusable products and things of that nature.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me. This sounds like the more I hear about this now, it sounds like it's a good amalgamation of product and process, because a lot of what you're saying, is defining, maintaining, ensuring that people adhere and follow best practices, those sorts of things, efficiency gains, things like that, right?
Correct.
Am I close with that one?
Absolutely. Spot on.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
It's weird because I didn't see it that way, but also I'm letting my experience color my opinion of what it is, because in my experience, when the Scrum Master or Agile coach, or even Enterprise Agile coach to a certain point, when they say they need something, they're often asked for a bunch of supporting evidence and whatever, documentation, trends, and then when product says they need something, it's usually like, oh, you need something? Oh, let me drop what I'm doing. Because product has a budget and product has the ear of the business and the trust of the business behind them. Whereas maybe if you're in a culture where a lot of your teams are contractors and not really permanent employees or whatever, or they're only there for a temporary period of time, I'm not going to say their opinion doesn't matter, but all things being equal, the person who's at the head of product, their opinion is
Paramount.
projected a lot further than any one person on any one team. So like it struck me as somebody who's in some kind of scaled product organization saying, hey, how come my teams don't have strong tools for this, or how come I don't have this, or
Sure.
how come we don't have solid processes for whatever. To give you an example, I brought up with my teams when I was part of a somewhat large program. There was I think there was 7 teams in the program, all delivering on the same cadence. And one of the things I brought to the program was each team does its own retrospective to say, like, what can we be doing better, right? And sometimes I'll come up with things that need to get bubbled up or whatever, and then do those things that really get bubbled up or not, right? But sometimes they have really solid suggestions. It's like, at what point do we all sit down together as a program together, because we're all delivering together, and talk about what could the program be doing better? Because not only will the teams have good suggestions, but I'm willing to guess that what team members think of as management, right? This role, like a scaled product manager, the teams would interpret that as management, right?
Right.
Now, what does management need to feel good about the program, and that we've got it, we've got everything buttoned up, we're working on everything? You know what I mean? Like, what does management need? It'd be nice to have their voice in that retrospective, but since they're not part of any team, they don't ever get their voice heard. So in a program retro, that's their opportunity to join and talk about things like that. Like that program had never done a program retro. So as I had the advantage of being properly placed in that organization to say, hey, why don't we do a program retro where we get literally everyone together? I'll pay for my time, like my product time. I'll pay for it. I don't, whatever, because I think we could get suggestions that on how teams work together. Whereas normally, when teams are on their own, they're never going to talk about how everyone works together as a larger, representative group.
Yeah, the micro versus the macro. I think that a program level retro, whatever scaling you're using, is absolutely critical. Otherwise, you don't improve. The inefficiencies of scale get in the way, right?
Sure.
That's the problem.
Well, and I think that is the beautiful thing about being a service manager. We are allowed and kind of expected to go both micro and macro, right? So from the macro to be part of the team, similar to the scrums who are codifying process and continuously pushing back, like laying correction into process for the macro. And then for the micro, being and like you said, being a scaled product manager in every one of the teams to allow for that one consciousness to transpose all of the different teams, to be there as, like you said, someone who if they were in that one team, would only have the myopic view of their project, right? And as a service manager, you're managing and expected to manage the overall delivery of that entire service, which is not one product or the other, or application or the other, right? But the service in its entirety. And then to your point, there are so many of us that manage each of those areas or portfolios that reside around the different either applications or areas that the businesses that we serve. So it's a special role. It really is. I lucked into like the most beautiful role I think that we have, because it is both defined and undefined in that idea.
It is, but there's a lot of different scaling frameworks that label, again, it's like coming into focus for me. There's a lot of different scaling frameworks that label the position at different names.
Right.
Like like now that I'm thinking about it more, I'm like, well, you truly are up here at the portfolio level or the program level, or what you probably label it a half a dozen different things.
Right.
And I'm not really sure if at that point when you're elevated up here, what is like to segue to SAFE for a second, what like at the portfolio level in SAFE, it's leadership, but there's not a job title at that role, right?
Not for this role. No.
Yeah. Well, there's not.
It might be a pay grade.
What is there? Yeah, but there's not a job. Is there a lean portfolio manager in SAFE? Is that a job title, role?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, I don't think so.
No.
I should probably know this.
It's confusing because people adopt different flavors of SAFE. So
leave suggestions in a comment box if you believe that there is
absolutely so
title.
I think depending on the framework, but the important thing is where we're converging is the role isn't necessarily right at a team level, although you're interested in what's going on at a team level.
Sure.
It's more across teams and then across different pockets of, you might say, business areas, business domains.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea would be to ensure that there is service level assurance. People are meeting the needs, and in layman's terms, that kind of manifests itself as, to use those terms, SLAs, OLAs, or whatever, right?
Right.
So the question, where I'm going with this is this, right? Is your role under, quotes, under IT management, under the business, under operations?
Oh, yeah.
You can just say yes,
Sure.
it's all of the above.
So, we are under IT management.
Mm-hmm.
And to that point, we report to the business on the status of the things that they have provided IT to service. Once the things have been passed across the table to a application support perspective, sure, and it is their responsibility. We've passed from the business side, we've passed the ownership and the responsibility to application support. Part of that service we're responsible for making sure stays up to, upholds that the level of quality that the business has come to expect. So to your point, we are a program level position, right? We are looking at a higher level, but we are absolutely invested in the teams, and they're succeeding in their results because their success turns directly into service-related wins, right? And we monitor that, and we report on that to the business, right? To let them know that the things that they're conceptualizing and even actualizing in iterations and putting out, be like, are either working or they're not, right? Be like, you iterated this, but your iteration wasn't what you believed it to be. Like, you might have completed the circle, but you missed the spot.
Right. That is interesting. So in many ways, it sounds like, and if this is typical of other organizations, right, that this role would be under IT, more of a cost center. Yeah, roundabout way, I know the business is probably paying in some way, shape, or form, but
always
overarching, you're under IT essentially, and
Sure.
working and reporting to the business is what I heard you say, right?
Correct, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, letting them know that the money they've paid for, what are the results? Is it working? Is it not working? Are there areas that we can, from being in the weeds and being in the ground and connecting with the teammates, are there areas that we can see improvement process, either through process or otherwise?
Yeah, so day in, day out, let's say you're responsible for a line of, I guess, product, right, as a service manager.
Right.
So day in, day out, what does your day typically kind of look like? I mean, are you? I imagine it depends, right? But are you fighting fires more?
What do you actually
often
do
than,
here?
Yeah. But like, are you defining standards? Are you making sure people adhere to them? Are you fighting fires? You're probably doing all of the above. But
Sure.
what does your day look like typically?
Sure. So my day consists of dealing with both the program level issues that I'm responsible for and then the team related relationships that I'm responsible for. All right. So at the program level, it is designing and enacting a process that allows for a clear reporting to the business of metrics, right? That we've done this much and we succeeded at this much, right? Or we failed at this much too, right? So it's the good and the bad. It's the yin and the yang of all of it, right? But in a reporting scenario that we have designed or been provided to us by the firm in a set of tools, we like to use these tools to report on how things are going, right? So from that one side, and then from a team related view, because of the universal view of the systems of teams that work with each other, right?
Yeah.
To know those processes helps the individual teams I support get their job done faster, right? So if they have to submit a request for something, or they have to go talk to Johnny on the third floor, right, and tell him what they need to do to get these 5 other steps done, it's my responsibility to make sure that I know both the current process, the most updated process, so that my teammates and the people that I support can do their jobs easier on a daily basis. And that's everything from if they are requesting a change to how they are setting up their distribution groups and communicating to stakeholders, and essentially being a repository for information that would help people to do their jobs on a easier day-to-day basis. So it sometimes feels like putting out a lot of fires. I like to think of it as that I get to help a lot of really smart people all day long, which is fantastic because a lot of the people that I work with, pretty much all of the people that I work with, are so polite and so helpful, and they come to me more often than not in this, like, sorry to bother you, and they're like this is why I'm here. Like, I'm here to help you do the thing that you need, like, so you asking me is like just means that I did my job today, right? So it's fantastic. It's a fantastic job. I love my job.
That's really awesome. So as someone who's responsible for service assurance, do you feel like you also are the owner of the quality of service? I'm going to try and get away from the technicalities. The quality and the grade are two different things, right? But let's just go with quality for now. So, do you feel like that you in air quotes, do you own the quality aspect of the service that you're in charge of?
I think that I do believe that I own the quality of the service that I'm in charge of. I'm not sure if that comes from my history of being a business owner, where I feel like it literally is on you, right? If we succeed, we fail, it's you that is responsible. If we make more money, if there's more money at the end of the week for our family to live off of, it's off of a decision that you made to either work harder or not work harder. So in that, I'm not sure where that comes from, because I think other people, it's on all of us to have that responsibility. We're all responsible. And I see that in where I work now. Like, everybody has although sometimes it depends on how, sometimes I can be misconstrued to be like, I want to care for everything, like you know, like pretty bow and smash something because you cared so much, right? But I think it's on all of us to own the quality of the service.
To your point about coming from the background of being a business owner, all the variables were under your control at that point, right? Right now, in your current role, that may not be the case.
Right.
So it's still being responsible, being accountable, I guess is a better term, right?
Sure.
Being accountable for the quality of the service when those variables are not in your control necessarily, or direct control or indirect control. So you don't have the strings, but you have to make the puppets dance.
Sure.
How does that sit with you?
Well, it's interesting. The beauty of that is when you're a business owner, you can just say, do what I say, right? Like you said, I own this. I'm going to move this here. If it's a bad decision, I don't care.
Right.
I did that, right? It's mine. I'll blow it up. I'll burn it. It's mine, right? In this, I think that it's a very much more intellectual pursuit of how to achieve something without unending power, right? Without the ability to just say, do what I say, right? You have to engage people. You have to inspire others, right? You have to ignore the third, right? There's so many variations on a theme. It is a greater challenge. And I'll tell this to my dad, right? Like, I know that everything that he does on a daily basis is difficult, because it is difficult to get up and not have anybody push you as a business owner, right? Like, you be your only motivation in life, right? But it is also difficult on a opposite side of the coin to be able to your point, get people to do what you want without being able to just say, do what I say or I'll fire you, right? To inspire people to do the thing that you want them to do because you think that it'll help them to engage both their rider and their elephant, right? So
this sounds so familiar as an enterprise agile coach, because you don't have a Thor's hammer that you just come down with. Right?
Absolutely.
I was gonna say, I take it all back. You sound like a scaled Scrum Master now.
Well, and there's a service manager, right? So we go through all the roles, right? Sometimes I'm a Scrum manager, sometimes I'm a product owner, and it really just depends on the day. I'm pretty good with the flow, and I didn't know. So I have loved IT since I was, I think, for my 10th birthday, I asked for the biggest hard drive that was known at the time. It was a 6 gig hard drive. Just like massive, 6 gigs. We went there, bought the hard drive, went back to put it in, didn't fit because my BIOS needed to be updated, right? So I've loved IT, but it never really, so I went to high school to become a dancer, college, dance and engineering, worked in a family business again my whole life, antifreeze recycling from 1998 to 2016. So I never really got to jump into the IT world until I went into IT in like 2018. And
sounds like, though, coming from a dancing background, you're pretty light on your feet, and you need to have that attribute as a service manager.
You know, it's interesting, but I often relate creating dances to the processes that I show people how to do, right? Like change management, it's a dance, right?
Sure. Yeah.
You just got to know the steps the way to move them into position. It's like tango, right? You have to know the moves. If somebody puts their hand here, you have to do this step, right? If I put my foot on the inside, it means to go in a certain direction. Same with change enablement, right? It's a dance. Same with really all of tech and tech management. It's a dance that you can teach people, and being able to understand the pattern, like learning dance in patterns, has definitely helped me learn the patterns of tech and processes, and how to teach people, like, hey, come on, I'll show you how to do this dance. It's really easy. You'll love it, right? Like afterwards, you'll be the best swing change management person you'll ever know.
That's awesome. That's a great analogy. I like it.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I think it lends itself very well, because I was a musician when I was a teenager. The way you're going to learn something complicated in music is you break it down, you start slow.
Right.
You start with a very small piece.
Right.
You learn that, and then over time, when you learn the whole thing, you start speeding up and speeding up and speeding up until you do it. And then you do it. You've done it a billion times at that point.
Right. You've hit KC a billion times, right? Now C, D, F, G. Right. Absolutely.
But the reason I bring that up is because the other part of that is you're not going to learn anything when you've got somebody over you yelling the whole time. You know what I mean? Like being like, when's it going to be done? When's it going to be done? Is it going to be done now? Like, get out of here. You're messing up the creative process. Get out of here.
Yeah.
So
you're highlighting that other alternate process there, right? Someone yelling at you, when's it going to be done? And then the precursor to that is somebody telling you, here's what you need to do, and here's when you need to do it by, right? The age-old work breakdowns. Right. Minion number 1, here's what you got to do. Do it by Tuesday. Minion number 2, you got to do this. You got to do this. And these people look at that and go, how did you come up with that conclusion? And not only on when do I have to do it by, but I'm looking around going, this isn't really, it doesn't fit, right, with what everybody else, all the other minions are doing. That's the method of old, I'll say, right? Yeah. A huge contrast with what's going on now. Things like in your day-to-day, coming up with those agreements and whatever else, I'm sure that doesn't just come down from somebody to everybody. It's a collaboration, right? Sure, somebody could suggest something, but then it's there to be knocked down by anyone.
Sure.
And then collectively, you reach consensus on what is formulated for your SLAs, your OLAs, etc.
Sure.
Kind of like the contract of how the groups within the organization will work together.
Sure. Well, so what you just described as a creation of a dance process from the choreographer's standpoint, right? So a choreographer will oftentimes come in and say, in my mind, I can't tell you how many, if I only had $1 for every time I heard this from a choreographer, it'd be like, in my mind, I had this idea, right? And it could be a shape, a space, a direction in space. Be like, you went up and did this amazing something, right? And as a dancer, creating the piece with a choreographer, I often refer to ourselves as being like the paint on the palette, right? They're making brush strokes and you're the paint, but your vibrance is shown through on the canvas. So while the choreographer or the product owner may have the idea of what the application should do or how it should be, as a tech person or as a dancer, it is your mind that takes concept into reality, right? And applies it with physics and all of those things, and your body creates the design of what their mind perceived, right? So it's that transition, and it's very much a service manager's responsibility to make sure that after you have conceptualized that and somebody else or a tech lead has gone through the process of like a dancer and creating that from concept into reality, that performance or that dance retains its vibrance, right? And that it continues to follow the path that was originally proposed in its inception, not necessarily just in its like how it is now. We're like, what do we do now? We're like, well, we had to do this. We're like, no, that's not really where we were. Its initial idea was, right? It's gone there now because you know, as is such, right?
Yeah. I think I touched on a couple of terms there. TLAs, the 3-letter acronyms, the SLAs, and
so many
OLAs, and
so many alphabets too. But geez, I wish I had a book.
I know.
I got service level agreement. Like I know that one.
Yes.
The OLA is the operational level agreement. Slightly different animal. There, as I understand it, and by all means, I'm not an expert on this,
No.
but as I understand it, the OLA is more about the process side. So service level agreement is times typically,
Sure.
up times, this and that.
Yeah.
The OLA is around process. Operationally, we will have a process that goes A to C to E to F to B, whatever it is, right? And it will do that for a given scenario. And then for another scenario, it's this whole other path, and this another one for a different one. For each of the scenarios that transpire, you will not deviate from those because that's become contractually, that's how you're going to operate with the business. So when they to take a practical example, right? So let's say the business comes across something that the end user reports as a flaw of some kind. It doesn't have to be a bug in a software system. It can be just a problem, anything.
Right.
Could be that the system just times out, right? Or whatever it is. What happens next, right? What happens next after that falls under the OLAs because typically somebody's contacted by this person who's experiencing the issue. And that is step 0, really. It's just how you learn about the issue. And then what happens next, and then what happens next after that, and after that. So that, as a process, is the operation. And everybody in the business understands it, right? And there's many such operations.
Sure.
So you're expected to, I'll summarize it this way, you're expected to follow predefined paths for each of these scenarios to the extent that they can be forecast and defined up front. If they can't, then there's this other ad hoc scenario that says it didn't fit any of those 15 things that we have. So here's what we did. And it's self-justifying.
Can't imagine that ever happening.
Yeah, I don't know. Like outside of parameters? What?
Yeah, exactly. And so as a service manager, you get involved in not only, helping define these, but also to ensure they're being followed, I guess, right?
Sure.
So what are some of the challenges you've seen around these things?
So I would say we less define them and more, like you said, to the latter, we make sure that they are followed or adhere to in that regard, or tried to adhere to as much as possible. As a service manager, I think that falls into, like I said, into the gray space, where if there is something that falls out of that defines itself as an impediment or a blocker, in that regard, it's our responsibility to knock that out of the water so that people continue to be able to just handle what they handle, right? So I don't know if you guys have ever had any Scrum at scale boards that had blockers or impediments on it, but those kind of things are immediately the red flags for us as service managers to attack, right? Any place we see like ridiculously either outdated or just processes that don't follow what we as either a program level or a larger organization have chosen to follow. Just like I said, as global citizens, we all try to adhere to that and be like Grace, be like, hey, by the way, there's a thing we do. We don't kind of do it that way.
Right.
Let's communicate, like help everybody get on the right foot, or the left foot if we're on the left foot at that point. So it's difficult because it's everybody's responsibility, but it's also service managers. I feel just general. We're there to generally help everybody to find those spaces that they're in and follow the processes that they're already doing.
I'm on the fence whether to revise and go back to some sort of scaled product manager or Scrum. There are elements of both.
Yeah, I concur with that. There are elements of both, right? Because there's as process owner, product. That's the product, really, right? So you own that. But then the process side of it, you mentioned the impediment boards, right? Things like that. They fall squarely in the Scrum Master world, and you're there as well. So I think it's the umbrella under which all of these things fall.
Yeah.
Right. Service management being that umbrella, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
It isn't carved out as such with kind of defined pen lines. It's as and when as and when needed, and then the continuous improvement and getting rid of the older processes that are defunct or no longer applicable, things like that.
Sure.
Right.
So in your analogy, I would go from the umbrella one to a net, right? So that anything within these teams that either falls out of their scope or out of their knowledge base, we catch. Mm-hmm. And we're there to make sure the ball isn't dropped. We help support the teams that we're netted underneath to make sure that there are no gaps that get left uncrossed, right? So that we're there to catch everything that falls.
Yeah, I think just to circle back to where we started, then this kind of a role, I've only seen this in large organizations. I have not seen this in the smaller organizations where things tend to fall through the cracks, to use that, right? And so we just say, well, it's not us.
Not me.
Says, not me. Yeah. So then what happens is inevitably nobody owns it.
Right.
Right? Ergo, everybody owns it because the customer doesn't care.
Right.
But it's more painful because now you're just simply saying, yeah, we dropped the ball. Whereas in your analogy, you don't drop the ball, you catch it in that net that is service management, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. Right.
I'm getting clearer in my mind about what the role is as we're going through this.
Yeah.
This is great.
Yeah, it sometimes feels like being a fireman, but it is rewarding in the best way to feel like the people who care so much about the product and who are there to do everything they can to make sure that they deliver for the multitudes of products that they support, right? Mm-hmm. That they want to deliver, and if something was in their way, especially if it's a process that is set up by the company that they work for, that is impeding them, like that we're there to clear that right out of the way. Like, let me show you let me show you the dance steps, let me show you the Konami code that'll get you right past this, right? I got you, right? Mm-hmm. And in that, it's not just the process, but the people who own the processes as well, right? So sometimes, and I'm thinking right now in particular of these few amazing gentlemen who do change enablement, and their process is often looked at as like oh, I got it, because it's misunderstood and misconstrued. And I think that for me, them on this, they're doing everything they can to protect the large organization from issues, whether it be from changes or whatever the case may be, right? So they're doing their job, and there's this like, these guys, right? And so for me as a service manager, I feel like it's my opportunity to provide a clarification of process that allows both the people who are saying, let's take caution in what we're doing here and let's be proper, and the people who are like, we got to get this done now. Right? So like there's the connection there. So I can talk to the people who are like, hey, did you do the thing? Right? And be like, yo, we got this. We did these 5 things. We're good. Right? So I can allow them to feel secure that we did the thing that they're asking us to do. And then on the other side, the people are like, oh my God, we need to do this right now. I'm like, yo, if you want to do this right now, you got to do these 5 steps real quick. And then they can do those, right? This is a Brene Brown quote that I oftentimes give to my wife because she listened to her and I don't. So I say it's my wife's quote. But clarity is kindness, right? So in all of these super intellectual people, like if we're just clear, like, yo, these are the 5 steps you need to take to make your job real easy. Yeah. They'll do them. Nobody's here to be like, oh, I don't want to. And we're like, no way. It's not a thing, right? Like most people, at least the ones I've run into. Nobody I've run into yet has been like, oh, I'm not doing that just because blah. Like it's usually because they either think their process works already or they don't understand why. Like they just like, why am I doing that? That seems redundant, or that seems so. If I can go in and clarify someone else's process and help our service be smooth, I'm all about that.
You sold me. You're a Scrum Master. Congratulations.
He's going back and forth still, so we're gonna keep going.
I am going back and forth. I'm going back and forth because it's like there's a lot of like, if the only piece of the code that I feel I've not cracked yet is like the people that actually own the application. Like in my mind, like I'm kind of drawing a border between when a program is new and you're spinning it up, and then to the time when it becomes fully operational and mature, and then the team that built it, or teams, right, multiple teams that built it, hand it off to a service manager. That's where I'm going in my mind with this. But I know that you already talked about like being part of like new development, so that's not really the case. But it would be easier to fit this into a nice box in my mind if it was like, well, we build it to some point, and then it needs to go into like a maintenance. You know what I mean, where it's operational and
that would fit the mold, right?
Yeah.
But as I understand it, the involvement of a service manager is from the get-go, where they start setting up the process when a new team is spun up.
Right. Yeah. Right. Okay.
Yeah, and that involvement might not be as large as it would be once the product's gone live and handed over. But it's still there.
See, that's scaled product in my mind. If the firm is like, oh, we want a new product that does X, Y, and Z and is different from our previous product, but over time it will absorb our previous product, because this is one of the things that I was involved in, then they'll bring on a scaled product person. The initiative will be very large, so they'll probably have to bring on several product people with their own teams under them, right? So now you've got a whole program. And then all of this is under the banner of service management, even though it's not launched yet. Eventually, it will be launched. It'll be in production. You'll have regular users, metrics of your normal usage. You'll have a normal amount of bugs, normal amount of changes that you have, monthly active users you're probably watching. You're probably watching volumes, stuff like that go up and down. You know what I mean? Support tickets or whatever, stuff like that go up and down. There's probably some basic metrics you'll roll out over a service to say, like, how is it doing? You know, it's doing okay. And then as it kind of sunsets and usage drops off, or you transfer users to a different service or whatever, you'll be with it through the whole life cycle. I understand that, but it's a heck of an intersection between the teams and the processes to maintain them.
Sure.
And then the actual product, like we need this feature, we don't need that feature. You know what I mean? I want this over that. Fix this bug, don't fix that.
Sure.
I guess the clarity for me would be, how involved are you when it comes to the actual decision? Like, let's say, let me give you an actual example. It'll be easier to, I think. Maybe it won't. I don't know. Feel free to ignore me.
Sure.
Welcome to the podcast. Yeah. When the program is at the early stages, you are probably involved in conversations about what features to build, what features to enhance, whether to cut and build something completely new or enhance something that already exists. Like, how involved are you in conversations like that?
None at all.
Oh,
so I think you're describing a product manager role there.
So what happens is I think that, so maybe this will help you understand where the box grows and shrinks.
Sure.
Right. So when new things are coming on, whether it be a new team or a new product, our role is to make sure that those processes fit into the larger machine that is already available, right? So how to make sure your product is in the system, that it's set up to be paid for, that all of the systems that our products are already a part of, yours will now also be part of that, right? So on that, from a firm-wide stand, we're like, here are the processes in place. And then to that same regard, once you have the creation of that product, the design of that product, I think we really only get involved when it revolves around what the end result will be, like what application support will need to provide as support, right? Like, what sort of KT will you do to make sure that the things that you've created are supportable after the fact, right? And then once it gets to that stage, right, once you've done as a product owner, you've created your product and you pass it along the table, then it becomes our responsibility again to make sure, similar to the macro sphere, but that the micro is being managed on an application support at each different level, that they're following the processes that business has set forth, that you've actually set those processes up, right? So along the way, we manage the process from the beginning, meaning that you are following the processes that have been set forth for you to follow as you're developing your stuff. very much in, like you said, a Scrum Manager role, right? In development side, and then once it gets passed along the table to a support, we continue to support those kind of processes that have been SOP'd, right? So that have been put into a standard. We're like, have we followed that? We're like, or at some point too, sometimes we go back across there. We're like, yeah, so we're having some problems with this, process because it hasn't really been defined. Right? Can you help us define this process to the development side? We're like, maybe this was a gap you missed, right? Like when you were developing this process, you missed how these users would do this one thing, right? So we bring that across the board. That's where we're in a retrospective. Like in a retro, we provide some insight into what's happening on the day to day.
Yeah, it sounds like a Scrum at Scale position. Now that I've heard that, no, because think about a Scrum at Scale position. Think about I don't even want to wheel up to an enterprise Agile coach, but think of a Scrum at Scale position where you have 50 teams. I mean, just ludicrous level of teams.
Sounds like a service manager.
Yeah, just a ridiculous level of teams where it's you're not going to be able to give any one individual attention for an entire sprint or whatever. You're gonna have to kind of fly at a much higher level, and when you have that many, when you're managing at scale, basically,
absolutely,
you have to say, listen, do you guys have the normal Scrum process? Assuming you're Scrum, you might not be, right?
Sure.
Your teams that are on where their programs have been kind of sunset, they may be doing Kanban, whatever. But I'm real interested in what kind of training you get for this kind of position, because I could see quite a few different trainings that would be very beneficial to you. It would be very beneficial to know how scaled programs deal with their product management, because you have to know what to look for, but I could also see all the process stuff that you deal with to understand how Scrum Masters on individual teams and how scaled Scrum Masters deal with things. I'm trying to think of this at scale. That's kind of helping me in this part 2 of the conversation here. What kind of helps me is if you had 50 teams, just an unmanageable amount for any one person type deal. All you basically would do would be to say, well, what are my standards? Well, I want to make sure every team has a planning schedule. I want to make sure every team works together to coordinate within their general area at some kind of scaled event to make sure that they're plugged into some type of scaled event to make sure they roll up and up and up and up, through the program. So if I have one team that's just with one product and they're not talking to any other teams, I'm going to be like, hey, what's going on with that team? Why are they not plugged into my program? Same thing with the product owners and roadmaps. I have a product team that's over here and they're not plugged into the rest of the product who are executing on the same roadmap. Right. What are they doing?
Right.
I just want to make sure that everyone, I almost don't want to call it a standard because it's could be interpreted as a
rigid sort of rule.
Yeah, it could be a cudgel to beat people with it. I almost don't want to say a standard, but
methodology.
No, but at a certain
reference,
point,
really.
But at a certain point, it is a standard because if I were to change jobs right now and go to a program that had 30 Scrum teams, a low ball number,
compared to 50.
and it's like, Brian, here's your 30 Scrum teams. Please manage them. I would, first of all, I'd be like, you're not paying me enough money. And then once we got over that,
right?
Once we got over that, I would say we can do this, but what I would try to lay down in place would be very broad. I'd be like, I want to know every team that doesn't do retrospectives, for example.
Right.
Tell me if you don't do a retrospective. Just let me know.
Sure.
It's things like that. It's me, so I would want to know how long they spend on their sprint plannings. How long does your team spend in sprint planning?
I would too.
Well, we only spend 30 minutes every 2 weeks, and I'd be like, whoa, red flag. Let me figure that out. Because they're probably taking some shortcuts.
Right.
Sure. And I would want to know who's taking shortcuts. I wonder, what is the background of a service manager? What does it take to become a service manager? What's the journey? What's the journey been to get the service
ganas. It takes ganas. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah.
To be a service manager, I pull from every bit of my knowledge on a constant basis, right? From my microscopic knowledge of the place I work at and the processes that they use, to my understanding of a dancer, as an artist, how to inspire people, to engage them, to communicate with them. As a tech person, someone who understands technology and allows me the availability to understand both the very technical jargon that the tech teams that I support, as they communicate to me the problems that they're having, they don't have to feel like they need to simplify things to a process where they're like explain it like I'm 5, right? But like they can just speak freely. I'll pick it up. Let me do the translation to either somebody who's looking to understand. I feel like business often, they don't want to be overly simplified, but they want to know, why do I care? Right? Be like, I got a lot of things to worry about. Why is this important to me?
Yeah.
If you can provide that, I'm interested in hearing what you got to say. If not, I got other things to do.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, I don't, well, not unfortunately, but just as a matter of the role, right? Application support, that's not your role to understand why the business cares about this not being, right? Their role is to fix the thing that's broke. Right. And I've been application support, and my job was to fix the thing that was broken as with haste. Right. So that the person could get back to doing printing or, putting something in a spreadsheet that they wanted to do. The understanding of the impact, the understanding of the financial results of why we need to build something new. Those are a business, a product owner, there's responsibilities, but sometimes without being in the weeds, they don't really, they thankfully, even where I'm at now, they clearly know, they're like, I'm not in the weeds, but like, that's not my spot.
Yeah, right.
So they look to us as service managers to provide that insight into where things are, either on a day-to-day basis, on a quarterly basis, monthly, at all of the normal time clips we're all used to, like weekly, monthly, quarterly, and all of those fantastic iterations.
Yeah, and plus you'd probably be the liaison between external vendors as well, right? When they roll up to the service, they're a component into the service, so you'd probably be the person or the role who would coordinate across for any kind of, I'd say, I mentioned the phrase earlier or the phrase grade of service, right, as opposed to the quality. So the grade is the quality could be excellent, right, and then your grade goes down. These are two different things. I hope the audience understands that. So when that happens, you'd have to engage with external vendors to ensure that the expectations of the business are met, right?
Correct. Yeah, and so external vendors, internal vendors, same. We manage the both in oftentimes a similar manner, right? Oftentimes external vendors have, their own processes that stay outside of the ones that, that when we bring in vendor internal and we ask them to fall in line. Yeah. Right. Do the thing that we all do in the process that we all do. Sometimes I think that's a lot easier, right? Because that is almost a Thor's hammer in that be like, I've paid you to follow what we're all following.
Meet your SLA.
Right. You're right. You meet my SLA hammer, right? Yeah. And then I get to tell you at the end of the month, did you meet that SLA, right? Whereas an external vendor would like, man, that's not in my scope. Like, sorry, that's on y'all.
I'm gonna have to issue a change request.
But like even then, but like external vendors be like, we changed something. Yeah, you didn't let us know. Well, I'm letting you know now.
Right.
Things are broken. And we're like, yo. You're like, well, now because I made a change. Be like, well, thanks. I appreciate that.
Thanks for the advance warning.
That's awesome.
You just hit on a whole new podcast topic, which is dealing with external stakeholders / vendors.
Absolutely.
That's a whole podcast topic. I've been lucky in my career where I haven't had to deal with too many external vendors, right? Because normally when I deal with external vendors, it's been because we're paying them for a service. Right. So when you're paying for somebody for a service, it's a little easier to get something out of them to be like, we're paying you.
Yeah. And,
or not paying. Or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only problem that I've ever encountered with external vendors is you tell them like, well, we're on sprints, so we're delivering every 2 weeks, so we have a 2-week window or whatever 3 week, whatever it is. And like we would like whatever teams you spin up to work that are dedicated to us to work on these as well. And they're like, oh yeah, sure. Yeah, we're on sprints now.
Yeah. But our next release is in March or April. We're in March now. So April, right?
And 3 month sprints. 3 month sprints.
Yeah.
And they don't get
marathons,
it.
not sprints.
That's them short sprints.
They just change the language because that's the language you want them to. Like that has been the.
This all has to be formalized in your contract with these people. I've dealt with external vendors way too often, but I want to go back to what makes you able to fulfill that role. So are there external bodies that provide like certifications and things like that in the service management world? Kind of a leading question, really, because there's ITIL, right? And then there's a service management framework and things like that. Yeah. So how important do you think it is to get those under your belt in order to be successful? Or is it helpful at all? It's sort of like, I've done this, by experience, I know what to do and it works, or I need to be rubber stamped by having these certs under me as well.
Yeah. Well, so I'm sure the governing bodies who stamp this are not going to enjoy what I say next.
Oh,
but I'll
both of you stop listening now.
Oh.
Yeah. I'm just ganas is the biggest thing, right? Like desire to be and to go above and beyond.
Yeah.
Trumps everything, right? Trumps whatever sort of certification you have, whatever sort of historical knowledge you have. Ganas is first and foremost, right? And then, in the words of my father, whom probably got it from somebody else, but like whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. So for me, service management, there are a lot of systems and frameworks that do help provide guidance to make better choices. But that's paramount in everything, right? From application design to home building, right? There are best processes for everything. Then there's logic and desire to just consistently do better. And I think that, for me, wins out more than having a certification to follow a certain process that you are more than likely going to find a variation on a theme for wherever you work anyways, right? It's not like there is, at least to my knowledge yet, and I could be naive about it, right? That there are no processes that are like, look, this business fits so perfectly within this square, right? Or in this circle, right? They're all variations on a theme.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely agree. The more I'm listening to this, more I'm thinking it's kind of analogous to a Scale Scrum Master type of role where you can go through the certification and it only gives you that kind of structured book knowledge, right? But then when you go to work, you find you have to adapt that to the situation at hand.
Right.
Guess what happens when you move jobs? You have to do it again. Right? So that framework, it might be useful to get your head around the structure, and that's about it. The other thing it might be useful for on a kind of selfish level would be to get you past the interview gates where you could say, I have the certification.
Sure. right.
But other than that, it is that ability to say, this is unique. You cannot follow the same thing like they do in the military. There's laid down rules, but on the ground, things are different. You come across marshy land or quicksand or whatever. You don't follow things to the order. You just simply inspect and adapt on the go. So that's the term that came to mind as you were saying that, is the inspect and adapt, which is why I drew the parallel to like a Scrum Master type of role at a scale level. Yeah.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, and it's very much, I go back to dancing, right? It's a variation on a theme of a dance that has been created before, right? It's a move you do in one performance that's different, but it's the same ideology, right? We define these frameworks to help us understand better, but to feel like they are the end all is naive in understanding that we're all kind of the variation on a theme. Like nothing is codified and able to formulate itself in a box. Right? We all have a small change that makes us worth the difference. Right? And so that is where the bright spots shine. You find in that process that something worked better. Grab that, hold on to it, move it through, right? And instead of saying like, well, we have to follow these steps regardless of improvement or deterrent.
Sounds like you really enjoy your work, Brian.
I love it. I really do. My dad told me, he's like, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life.
That's right. Yeah, that's awesome.
So I really enjoy on a daily basis. So I have done, in my arc of my different jobs, I've boiled antifreeze outside in the Florida sun, boiling antifreeze at 300 degrees with fumes and heat and sweat. And like the highlight of my day was going to the ice box and getting a Coke, right? And then working inside in an office with air conditioning and like things are fantastic and I get to talk to people and like type on a computer all day, be like, this is amazing. We're like, I don't know, like there's like, I've done the dirty job. Right. I have done the dirty job, right? I come home to the point where like, I don't even say hello to my wife. I just walk straight to the shower because we're like, you don't want to touch me. You don't want to see me because like I am emoting ethylene glycol through my pores, right? Be like, you could set me on fire. I wouldn't burn till 175 degrees. And this as a differentiation from that, like this is Gucci. Like this is life on the like I'm conceptualizing things to get done. We work hard. I don't doubt that there is I'm mentally exhausted sometimes where I wasn't physically exhausted on one soda, come home and like I could do mental things all night long, right? So it's a different exhaustion. And physically sometimes too. But in the end, a happy, joyous, mental, like I feel like I am mentally like doing backflips I get to do backflips all day in my mind and like conceptualize like the one project I was telling you about. So this team I support, they do a large amount of work. It's a simple task. They send out emails, right? And there was a solution that was being suggested in regards to like, oh, we're going to pay for this new solution. We're going to bring a song and teach them how to do this. But as a company, we had this other platform, right, in which I built the solution. And so I was like, let me build, because this seems pretty simple, right? So I did some Google searches, some like all right, I collated this application, put these things together, and provided it as an opportunity for a solution to a team I support, right? And as an artist, as a creator, like creating something and then letting it live in the world and making it so that people get benefit from it is like the penultimate, right? I've created something that people use, they like, it emotionally resonates them, whatever. As an artist, all of those things are available. And as a technologist, being able to be artistically available this is amazing. And that this company has allowed me to the freedom to both support these teams in all the ways we've already set forward and whatever way you can conceptualize, right? Wow. And here's the whole system here's a cornucopia of tools that we've brought on, be like, figure one out, grab one off the shelf and bring it in. And if you can figure something out how to use with it, by all means, go ahead. Right? So I did that, right? Like, and everybody from our system architecture was like, hey, awesome, great, good job, go do it. And that empowerment and also enablement from a large scale has allowed me to provide a free solution to a team that I support that was about to buy one, right? And cost our firm not like an unridiculous amount of money, but if everybody continues to do that, like if that option is available, that's a general large-scale opportunity for everybody continues to save the firm money. As a business owner, that's what I was constantly trying to do, trying to provide opportunities for us to save money, right? Like, so that what we would do would turn into rewards or yield income on the bottom line.
Sure. Right.
And to have that opportunity from a larger corporation it's amazing, right? That they're thinking that they're that forward thinking to try and do that. That's amazing.
I think that's great. Yeah. So is there something that you say to yourself as a service manager, I absolutely despise this? I don't use the word hate because it's strong. I
despise how many hours we've conceptually identified are in a day.
Yeah.
It's pain. Time is a construct I'm just constantly fighting against in my day-to-day job. Whoever figured that out, we need to work on that. I think the only things in my job that I find a detriment are self-inflicted. Right? So constantly trying to find ways to better organize, ways to better conceptualize both to-do tasks and even concepts I'm trying to reimagine, right? Because as service managers, we manage a lot of the processes, but that doesn't mean, and we've been given the opportunity to reorganize those for the betterment, right? But not for just for on a whim. Like, let's just throw it all out the buck. Let's throw the baby out with the bathwater, right?
Yeah.
But in that regard, it's a beautiful opportunity to create whatever you can perceive to be an opportunity to make things better.
What about the politics? I imagine there's plenty of those, given all the different types of stakeholders involved. How do you find that plays out, and how do you deal with that?
I think that everybody is very interested in trying to do the best for the product and for the people who are consuming the product, right? Mm-hmm. In that, I believe there is for lack of a better word, a hazing period as you come on as a service manager, right? But there's a moment of a period of not belief, or preparing, just understanding if you are what we expect you to be, right? If you can muster up to the job, and if you clarify or you fulfill that ability to satisfy the questions in the product owners that you support, and you gain their trust, then there is, at this point, I have yet to find something that they don't trust you in. Once you garner the fact that you are there to provide the best service, right? And then you're there to actually do the work that provides them the service that they're looking to pay for, right? I think that there becomes a circular trust between product owners and service managers, that you have their best interest at mind, and you're going to stop at nothing to make sure that they get the service that they deserve, right? And not that they want or that they pay for, but that they deserve, right? Because nothing would make you happier as a service manager than your product owner to be happy with the product that you're servicing.
That's very well put. So it sounds like, you're saying that there's some kind of a probationary period a little bit, right?
Sure.
Initially, because you're just they're getting to know you mainly, but once you perform to their expectations, and then they give you plenty of rope to deal with whatever you need to deal with, right? That's awesome. You can't say that about every job.
Sure. I think. Yeah, it's definitely a relationship building task, right? And you're there to respond to your product owner's needs and what they want and what they're looking for in the service that you're providing, and really instill in them that you will stop at nothing to make sure that they are happy with the results that they get, right? And if they're not, you're interested to hear that too, right? Like I have an awesome product owner who asks a lot of questions. And every time he asks questions, I make sure that I thank him for it on the side. Like I really, because I appreciate people who don't just be like, okay, who don't just take it in, right? But because most of us have questions even when we don't verbalize them, right?
For sure.
Like, so it when you put yourself out there like that by asking questions, you often put yourself in a vulnerable position, right? I know sometimes product owners being like it seems like they're the boss, so they're not vulnerable, right?
Yeah.
But putting yourself out there and questioning somebody's either what they've communicated or what they're doing is not as easy, as it may seem from being the person who's questioning, like, oh, they just question everything I do, right? But but it's not really that. Like, sure, you do have some people in positions of leadership that are like, who just do the whole, like, I'm just going to ask a question to make it seem like I'm doing a job, right? But that's not this product owner that I work with. He's usually got fantastically poignant questions, clearly listening into what was going on, clearly wants the next update on what has been going on. Right. And I appreciate that. I appreciate the engagement because that lets me know where I am. I may think that I'm here, but the clarification of where he understands me to be is over here.
Right.
So that it kind of goes back to that clarity is kindness. But like it's all about understanding perception and providing clarity to that perception as a service manager. And if a product owner comes in and has questions, then I clearly haven't satisfied that requirement yet.
That's a great perspective. So once a person gets into this role and performs it for a period of time, what's next? What's the career progression of a service manager look like? And there may be many, but let's just explore a couple of them.
And where do I apply?
Sure.
That's right.
No, I won't be applying. To me, it sounds a lot like developing relationships. You know what I mean? Really understanding what people need and then helping them fulfill that need. Maybe sometimes, probably the better ones, fulfill the need before people know they need that need. Right. And then maintaining relationships because it's relationships with a lot of people over the life of a program. Because service offering, whatever you want to call it, that's not down my alley. It seems like a career progression that a Scrum Master would take. You start with a Scrum Master, maybe move up to like a program manager or whatever, and then eventually you'll fall into this type of role.
Sure.
That's what it seems like. It seems like someone who's good at establishing relationships, someone who is empathetic, who understands how to establish relationships with other people, how to establish a deep trust with other people in the program, to understand what they need, empathy to understand what they need, hopefully before they need it, and to really take gratification out of helping other people and teams be successful in the program. Whereas like the product manager is completely different.
Yeah, definitely.
Completely different. It's overlap.
Sure, there's a lot of overlap, right? But so I get where you come from. The other thing I was thinking about, though, the other avenue maybe for people to gravitate to this situation might be from like production support or even frontline customer support, because you're dealing with satisfying customers in either case, right?
Yeah.
Production support may be a little bit more of a technical role. Customer support, you're listening to customers. Eventually, you have to have a resolution. So you're still establishing that trust, or trying to. Maybe it's one-on-one. Here, it's on a broader scale. But scale aside, those folks I can see those folks aspiring to become a service manager.
Sure.
Once they garner their experience and the skill sets, right?
Sure.
That you've been talking about.
The best support people will climb the ladder to who can actually resolve the problem.
Yeah.
And even if they get to a point where they're just like completely cut off, like when I think of the product manager, like, we're not going to solve that bug. Like, I don't care about it. No,
it's
sorry
that
you won the lottery.
Sure.
Yeah, sorry you won the lottery and you got the one customer that encountered that bug, but we're not solving it. Like,
right.
That's it. Like, the best support people can climb the ladder until they get to the real answer, and then they have to go manage a relationship with the customer to figure out how they're going to portray that or whatever. But I've known a few people that have come up through support to old school project management, to product managers, into QA. When I was a QA manager, I knew a couple of people that they came through support. Because in support, you have a solid customer-centric view of the whole process.
Yes.
And the whole end-to-end process. And then, like I said, the best people understand what's just under the covers of the application, all the relationships and the politics and everything you were hinting at before. And if you can get somebody like that who is ready to dig for the details, put them up, put them over, man.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that what's interesting for me is coming from the support side and, like you said, being the person who made the decision of what needed to be fixed to solve the problem, right? And then coming to a service manager side and managing the people who then are the ones who solve the problem, right? This is very difficult for me because, maybe type A personality. I'm not sure what psychological profile I fit into that causes this, but I like to be the one clicking the button that does the thing that fixes it, right? And that I've created something that has resolved the problem, and that was satisfying to me initially as a support person. When I moved into this role, I had to realize or had to learn how to enjoy the results of providing the opportunity for the people who were more technically involved. Not more technically inclined, because I feel like I'm pretty technically inclined, right? So, but that they were more technically involved. They either had more knowledge of the application or whatever they were working on, right? Yeah. That it was their job to do the thing that fixed it, right? So I wasn't the guy. It was difficult to step back and be like, but I provided an opportunity that this person wouldn't have had they not gone through the other steps before they got to the one click button, right? I provided them 6 steps ahead of before the click button. Yeah. So in that too, I found joy in resolving people's processes faster, right? So like back to the change, right? Change enablement, right? People like, so if in your process to click that button to solve the problem, I helped you get there faster by training you in the process of change enablement, then I feel like I contributed to the click button, to the George Jetson moment where you press the button and everything worked out fine, right?
Right.
So be like, so in that it's a different part of the process, but still supportive of the result.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Of the outcome. Like
right.
I feel like there's terminology that goes along with what we're talking about right now, which is and the funny part of this is there are some people that never make the transition from having to be involved in the output to just being just a larger part of the ecosystem that generates the outcome that you're looking for.
Right.
And they cannot step up and make that. They just can't let go of that particular little thing.
Sure.
And they hold themselves back. They hold their careers back because of that. But I would imagine it's because you like the family business and all the kind of stuff that you were involved in before. It's like, look, I did a bunch of dirty jobs and I did a bunch of stuff for the family. And because you went through those experiences, I would expect you got to appreciate it's like you can't always be responsible for literally everything, Yeah.
That was a hard lesson. It was a very hard lesson. I think my last job previously helped me with that. I have a good buddy who lives in New York who was part of the application support team, and he pretty much helped me, and my boss too at the same time. She was fantastic in training me to go from a business owner where you are absolutely responsible for everything.
Yeah.
And anything that falls through the cracks is on you, right? In that same service manager, like you're the net, you're the umbrella, you're the box on the outside, you are everything.
So split that, because there's another continuing theme of the podcast, which is responsibility and accountability go together. So like one is who is the person who has to do the job? That's responsibility. And then the other is who is the person that everyone talks to, communicates with about. So when you're the business owner,
right?
When you're it's like product as well gets into this trap. You are both in many, many circumstances.
Sure.
You can go do things and then you can be accountable to everything. But at some point, you have to hand stuff off to your team, and now you're splitting that.
Right.
Okay. That's splitting those is a very dangerous.
It's a hard thing to do. Yeah, it's super difficult.
It's like letting go of your baby.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really?
Well, but so in that, right? So we used to growing up, we used to have this thing where we would very seldomly take vacations,
I live under that sword of Damocles.
Right? Yeah, no doubt, right? And is this the case, right? We're like, but in the same respect, I think that there are clearly defined ways that you can provide opportunity for people to continue the path that you set forth while you're gone.
Yeah.
Right? And if you sometimes when you hold those two things too closely to your chest and you're like you said, I don't want to let my baby go because you're gonna hurt it. Like you never give the other person the opportunity to show you how awesome they are. Yeah. And then, as is often the case, in hindsight, you look back and you say, I wish I would have given that person more. Right. I wish I would have enabled them to be the person that I know that they were. Yeah. Right. And being in this job, being enabled by my bosses and being told, yeah, go do it. Do the thing. Right. That sounds great. Go. Has enabled me to support people in ways that financially we would have thrown a lot of money at it, and it may not. And I feel confident saying that the financial thing that we would have paid for would not have solved the problem with what I have provided in the ways that I provided. It would have left a lot of stuff out. MVP, right? As minimum viable product. But in the opportunity presented to conceptualize and to imagine and to dream a solution and provide it to people has allowed me to really, really feel like I contributed.
It's awesome to have that empowerment to experiment from leadership as well, right? That's kind of what you're saying there. Yeah, that they give you their carte blanche. It's like go do it, right? And you try it and you go, I tried this, it didn't work, and that's not when they beat you down, but they go, okay, well, what are you gonna do now? Yeah, right? And I'm gonna do this. So if you just go to them with alternate solutions and say, this didn't work, but I'm trying this. Yeah, it's almost an implicit. It's never, oh, I messed up. It's never that. It's I tried this, it didn't work. Here's what I'm going to try next, and they say, okay. So that's you have their backing from that perspective. Yeah, that's great.
And you say backing, and it sparks an emotional state, right? Because I definitely feel like both on the product owner and the leadership from the tech side, that backing that. Once we were brought onto the team and once that trust was established, it's like, I got you. I got your back. Do what you need to do. I trust you to make the decisions similar, like as if I was making them myself kind of deal, right? So I trust you to go about, and like you said, this didn't work. We all fail, right? It's not about failures. It's about bringing a different solution after the fact. They're like, hey, this didn't, but this will work. In this company, you come with solutions, everybody's ready to listen and feel like, well, all right, let's do this. Let's find the next step in that direction. So I couldn't be more excited or love my job more.
That's awesome that you're empowered that way. I think it's fantastic.
Empowered in so many awesome ways. Just even, and what's nice is like, good job, great idea. It's amazing how empowering those small phrases are in your day-to-day job, right? Like, oh, I've been meaning to give that person attention. I should have given them more attention. I'm glad you did. Thank you so much. It's like I feel like I just got a raise. I didn't get a raise. I checked my bank account. I didn't get a raise. But, it does feel like emotionally.
But your human equity went up, which is what counts,
man.
Right?
My love bank got a deposit.
Yeah.
This is the most Scrum Master Agile Coach conversation I've ever heard. Like I don't think I can take it anymore.
So what advice would you give to some budding service managers, right? What should they do? What should they not do? Words of wisdom, pearls of wisdom, whatever you want to say.
Well, as far as not do, I'd say that's going to be an individual choice. You're gonna have to sure that one up on your own. As far as words of wisdom, ganas, right? Desire, passion to do and be the best at what you possibly can do. There's nothing that can eclipse that. Nothing in my life has yet to eclipse that, right? Not grade point average, not qualifications on your resume, nothing. Ganas trumps all. So if you have a job that you want to do if you have a position you want as a service manager, if there's a process you want to attack, have desire to do it. Right? And,
Awesome.
and there really is, there's nothing that can stop you at that point.
Oh man, that's awesome. That's great. All right, thank you. All right, guys. So you've heard it here. If you have any questions, let us know down there in the comments question section, down somewhere down there. Otherwise, if you like what you heard, then smash that like button.
Oh no!
Subscribe. Get updates.
Let us